You want to hear us go game by game to talk wide receivers? We got you. You want us to talk about tiers for wide receivers in fantasy? We got you. We're going to go through every matchup, talk about every receiver that matters, and tell you what tier they should be in for week 7. Thankfully, only 2 teams on bye this week. It's the Bears and the Cowboys. So no CeeDee Lamb, but let's talk about the guys who are must starts. You got them. You roll with them. No questions asked. Justin Jefferson coming off a bye. Amon-Ra St. Brown, still a must start. DK Metcalf, not the greatest week 6, but still keep him in your lineup. Drake London has definitely become a must start. Jamar Chase, you know he is always a must start. AJ Brown, also come back strong. Cooper Kupp may be back in week 7. If he is, you got to start him as well. And then Malik Neighbors, we're going to hope he does finally return. And if so, you've got to start him too. Now, I'm not sure how many receivers are going to be starting from the Broncos and Saints matchup. It's on Thursday night. It's the first one of the week. So let's start with Courtland Sutton. What do you think he will do? Another miraculous touchdown grab in the end zone?
He could. I mean, this Saints defense has been really bad, but still, so has the Broncos passing attack. I'll say Courtland Sutton only a flex this week.
Yeah, I mean, I was actually ready to just kind of count out Sutton for fantasy purposes, and then he did make that grab. Look, he could always score. The Saints defense has just completely fallen apart the last couple of weeks, but he's still, to me, never really more than a flex option. Now, for the Saints, well, we don't know what Chris Olave is going to do with Spencer Rattler because we only saw one play where he got that concussion after fumbling. So, if Olave is cleared, there's a big if here on Thursday, do you trust him?
No, you can't trust him. Like you said, we don't know what Spencer Rattler's going to give us. He was very up and down, and it's the Broncos. Pat Surtain, no way I could start Olave.
There's too many things working against him. Injury on a short week, rookie quarterback Surtain. Nah, this is probably the only week I'll just say, even if Olave is active, he's in a void. Now, the Saints might even be without the number 2 receiver, Rashid Shaheed, because on Monday suffered a knee injury that they are calling concerning. That definitely concerns me.
Yeah, it concerns me too. I mean, even if Rashid Shaheed somehow plays, how can you start him in this matchup? He scored last week, but it was on a punt return or a kick return. He's going to be in my avoid for sure.
I don't think that you were really that crazy about starting him anyways with this injury. Let's just sit him out. No to Shaheed. He's going to be in a void too. Now, first game on the Sunday slate. It's going to be another early one in London. The Jaguars are still there. The Patriots are going to pay them a visit. So with a new quarterback, Drake May, Demario Douglas actually looked pretty good and helped in fantasy if anybody actually started him. Are you actually starting him in this matchup?
I don't know if I'm going to need to start him this week, but I think if you do, you got to feel good about him. It's the Jaguars. He's clearly Drake May's top target here. And yeah, Drake May was rocky, but he looked good enough. So I'm going to say Demario Douglas this week is a solid start.
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned him as a waiver wire pickup, not just because he, caught a few passes from Drake May, but he was his first read, his first target, and this Jacksonville defense, if you didn't know it from the eye test, is the second worst statistically against wide receivers. So I won't go too far, but I'll say he is a solid start. Now on the Jacksonville side, just when we were ready to say, you got to start Brian Thomas, and then did nothing like a lot of Jags last week. Can he bounce back?
I don't know. It's another tough matchup here. Christian Gonzalez on the other side. He's got upside, but he's also got risk. So I'm going to say this week he's a flex start, but he's at the higher end of the flex starts.
Yeah, I don't know that we can ever be too low on Thomas. I mean, he hadn't really busted for fantasy yet, but yeah, this matchup is just okay. A flex with upside. That sounds about right. And then Christian Kirk, just when it looked like he was coming back to relevance, a dud for him too. Is Kirk more than a flex or maybe less?
He's the lower end of the flex for me. I think he might actually be better than Brian Thomas in this game. Again, because not so much Christian Gonzalez. But at the same time, how good can we feel here? At lower end of the flex.
Yeah, a lot of people will point to Evan Ingram coming back and going off, to Christian Kirk falling off. Look, let's remember that last year, even though Ingram had a great season, it didn't really hurt Christian Kirk too much. But still, he's just a flex right now. And Gabe Davis somehow caught 2 touchdowns, even though he dropped one early in the game. I mean, come on. If we're not that crazy about the first 2 Jags, we can't be too crazy about Gabe Davis.
No, this haven't we seen this before, this movie before? Like, now you put him in your lineup this week and he does nothing. I'm going to avoid Gabe Davis.
Still avoiding him. This is why he's a best ball only pick. The Lions at the Vikings could be a good one. This game has one of the highest implied totals early in the week. Let's start with that passing game. Jameson Williams got back on the scoreboard. Should have had a second touchdown even, but it was wiped out by penalty. How do you feel about him against the Vikings?
I feel the same way I always do. I might feel a little bit better about him because the Vikings, they can give up big plays to the secondary. But again, he's not getting a lot of targets here. He's making the most of his targets because it seems like every time he catches a pass, it's a 50-yard touchdown or something. But if you don't get that, you're not going to be very happy you put Jameson Williams in your lineup. But it is a good matchup. I'm going to keep him in the flex tier, but again, he's towards the upper end of the flex tier.
I almost want to put him in the solid tier because here's the thing. He always has that upside, but remember before the bye a couple weeks ago, called a big game for Garrett Wilson because the Vikings, one thing they do is give up points to wide receivers. And so I think this could be a nice Jameson week, but I also can't guarantee it. So I'll just say a very high upside flex play. And then the Vikings do have Jordan Addison back. Where does he rank for you this week?
Same as he always ranks for me. I mean, he's got upside, but he's got risk. He's, again, another upside flex play.
Actually, I'm going to say that Addison falls in the solid tier for me because Lions do give up points to wide receivers. I feel like there's going to be a lot of passing in this contest. And Addison always has touchdown upside. So I think he's at least a solid wide receiver 3 in a 12-team league. Next up, we got the Titans at the Bills. Not much of a passing game to speak of. You know, the leader right now in those unrealized air yards is Calvin Ridley. How many more unrealized air yards are on the slate this week?
Probably a lot. As long as Will Levis is the quarterback, I'm avoiding this Titans receiver room. I am avoiding Calvin Ridley.
That's probably smart. I don't want to completely give up here. I feel like there's too much talent, but of course, when does that really matter when you get zero catches? It's not a bad matchup on paper. Ridley's not a bad receiver. I wonder if there's a squeaky wheel treatment, but I also wonder if I'm just now making excuses for this whole Titans pass game. I think Ridley is at least a risky flex. Now, DeAndre Hopkins didn't do nothing last week, but it wasn't that much. 54 yards? Is he at least a flex?
No, hard pass as long as Will Levis is under center.
I think he's a desperation flex if you need somebody because they might have to pass a lot. But I will say this, look, don't feel great about his yardage total here. Right now on Underdog, if you do pick'ems, we generally like to look for guys we like and go higher. But how about this? Take the lower on DeAndre Hopkins, 42.5 receiving yards. He barely broke that last week. Might not do it this week, so I'm going to go ahead and take D-Hop lower right now. And then if you're new to Underdog because you haven't tried pick'ems yet, do it right now and you get a free pick. It's Bo Nix just getting 1 yard on Thursday night. Take that freebie, combine it with this or any other pick you like. Just make sure you use code ENDGAME when you first sign up for Underdog to take advantage of that and all their other great offers. Now for Buffalo, Khalil Shakir did play in week 6, but not that much and did not quite look right. So you're going to feel he does better against this Titans defense.
Very risky here. Yeah, he was very limited in that game. Maybe he shouldn't have even played, to be honest. And this is not a great matchup against this Titans secondary. Low end of the flex.
Yeah, I mean, if he gets closer to 100%, if he's just good by next week, even though it's a short week for them, he's a flex option. Again, never the highest ceiling, but he's also not the worst. Now, Keon Coleman, again, it's too deep for me. It's either he catches a long pass or touchdown, or he gives you nothing. I don't want to risk the nothing. I'm still just avoiding him no matter what the matchup is.
Same. For all the reasons you just said, definitely avoiding Coleman.
And Curtis Samuel, I mean, he finally did a little something against the Jets, but is it enough?
No, not enough. Avoiding Curtis Samuel.
I think for the most part, other than Shakir, and even then it's iffy, you can just avoid the rest of the Bills receivers. Dolphins taking on the Colts. Well, Tua is not back yet. That means Tyler Huntley will be slinging it to Tyreek Hill. You feel any better about Tyreek Hill coming off a bye?
I mean, what did he have, like 6 catches last week or something? I mean, he was okay for fantasy. I don't feel great, but I think he's at least a flex this week.
I think that's fair. He is still in the flex tier. I mean, the Colts defense is still not good, but you can't be much higher because how much are they even going to pass it? Jalen Waddle, is he even in the flex tier?
No, he's going to sadly be in my avoid tier.
At least one more week. I mean, just the upside is not there, so you can sit Waddle. Now the Colts might have themselves a new number one receiver. Josh Downs has been getting mad targets. Now I know Anthony Richardson might take over again at quarterback, but are you still in on Josh Downs?
I am. Not as much as I would be with Flacco, but they're still going to have to throw the ball, and it's not like, Anthony Richardson is Deshaun Watson or something out here. So I still think Josh Downs in this matchup is a solid start.
Solid is exactly right. I mean, the ceiling isn't sky high or anything like that, but not a tough matchup. Anthony Richardson is still a capable quarterback. Downs is getting targeted so much. He is a solid receiver in PPR going forward. Michael Pittman is out there and playing, and he actually caught a touchdown somehow. It was actually a pretty impressive one. Do you think Pittman's upside is capped, though, because of AR?
Yes, and because I think of his back and everything else, so, and probably Josh Downs as well. So Michael Pittman, to me, just a flex.
Agree, that might change long term. I mean, you definitely can still start Pittman, just don't feel great about it. So flex if you need him. Seahawks taking on the Falcons. Wasn't DK's best game in week 6, but we're still saying you have to start him. What about Tyler Lockett, though? Is he, a flex or maybe even a solid start? I mean, he did okay last week.
He did okay. He got that garbage time touchdown, but I mean, that was like his first real good game of the season. I can't put him in the solid start tier, but I think he's a flex.
Feels like he's always just going to be kind of there as a flex. Never going to have a big game. Never going to do nothing. So he's kind of one of those ideal bye-week fillers to get you some points. So you can flex him. JSN, that would be Jackson Smith and Jigba. Man, really thought by now he would be in the strong tier, but I can't put him there.
No, I'm not even going to put him in the solid tier. I'm going to put him in the flex tier, but he's at the lower end of the flex tier. He's like that, I need some points flex tier.
Well, one thing is he's got at least a couple of touchdowns. Maybe, I don't know. No, he's a flex. I mean, look, it's just really disappointing. The separation hasn't been there. The matchup isn't great. Just a flex. All right, and then the Falcons side, I mean, yeah, Drake London has established himself as the number one receiver. Has Darnell Mooney established himself as an every week starter in fantasy?
Yeah, I had a bit of a down week last week, but I'm not scared of this Seahawks secondary. It's banged up right now. The Seahawks are a mess. Darnell Mooney, he's risky, so I can't say like solid start or anything. I know after week 5, and he had that big game, everybody was like, oh, Darnell Mooney, but he's got the upside still. He's risky, so he'll be in the flex, but towards the higher end.
Yeah, statistically, still not a great matchup. I think partly just because teams haven't really had to pass that much against the Seahawks because they're able to score so many points so early. But yeah, I think Mooney is always going to be kind of a low-end solid type of receiver. He's getting the volume. What about Ray McCloud? Is there room for him on your roster?
That was very disappointing last week. He had a great matchup out of the slot and did basically nothing except fumble the football. Ray McCloud, I'm going to avoid.
It's not one of those weeks where you should need a Ray McCloud. If you do, I think he's a desperation flex. Yeah, but with Drake London really emerging and all of a sudden Kyle Pitts now actually getting some action, yeah, McCloud has kind of fallen almost off the radar. Now, hopefully this video helps you with all your start-sit decisions, but if you still have questions for start-sit, waiver wire trades, or anything fantasy football related, use the Draft Lane app because that connects you directly with Chris and myself for all your fantasy football needs. Download it for free right now. All right, this should be a good one. The Texans are going to take on the Packers at Lambeau Field. No Nico Collins, as you know. Stephon Diggs is the wide receiver one, and he's looked like the wide receiver one. I mean, is there any reason not to start Diggs?
I don't think so. You got to be feeling pretty good if you have Diggs. I will say, though, Jair Alexander back last week. The secondary looked better, but at the same time, I'm not scared off of Stephon Diggs because of Jair Alexander. I will say strong start, I think.
Yeah, he's got to be a strong start. He's looking not quite like the prime version of Stephon Diggs, but yeah, I mean, he's the number one guy there. He's looked good. He's scoring touchdowns. I like Diggs as a strong start. And now Tank Dell, we can finally feel good about him. Had his first really good fantasy day of the season. Does he keep it going?
I don't see why not. He actually out-targeted Stephon Diggs last week, had a higher first read percentage, but he's also riskier, I feel like, than Stephon Diggs. So I'll keep him at the higher end of the solid starts.
Yeah, I'm going to put Diggs ahead of him still, but yeah, we saw exactly what we needed to see from Tank Dell. I don't think you have to start him, but he is a solid start. All right, here's the fun part. We're going to talk about all the Packers receivers, although it's a little different than it was a week ago. First, Jaden Reed. He scored, but he didn't go off last week. Does he get better against the Texans?
He could. It's a tough secondary, but Jaden Reed's one of those guys, like, you're just always so scared to bench him because he has that upside, but it is a tough matchup this week, so kind of like Tank Dell, I'll put him at the higher end of the solid starts.
That's exactly what I'm thinking. Always a solid start because he has that big playability. Jordan Love is just looking good, really good again, so he's solid because the matchup isn't great. And then the return of Romeo Doubs. 2 touchdowns, of course, when absolutely nobody started him in fantasy. Can you start him in fantasy now?
You can, but don't go crazy here. Don't go chasing this. This is what Romeo Doubs does. This week he'll probably have 0 touchdowns, but he gets targets. He's involved. I'll put him in the flex.
Yeah, this is exactly the type of player Romeo Doubs is. Touchdown / big play upside with a low ceiling. It's not a great spot. The Texans do have 2 really good corners. I don't know if this is the week I really want to start Doubs, but he's at least a flex option. And then there's Christian Watson. Yeah, he's back. If he was dropped, you should pick him up, but should you start him?
I think so. Why not? This guy always has weekly upside. Yes, he's a little risky, but he's got that weekly upside. So I'm going to put him one of those guys again, a flex, but towards the higher end of the flex.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. Look, you pick him up. It doesn't mean you have to start him every week, but you can start him any week, if that makes sense, because he always has that home run ability. This isn't necessarily going to be his best game, but hey, he's a solid start going forward as long as he's healthy. Now let's talk Bengals at the Browns. So Jamar Chase is set and forget, but interestingly enough, T. Higgins now seems to be the first read more often. Does T. Higgins become a borderline must start?
I don't see how you bench T. Higgins. He's been great since he's come back. He's involved. He's more involved than Chase. T. Higgins, a strong start.
It's got to be a very strong start. I'll tell you what, before the season started, early in the season, I would say, the Browns defense, it's tough. It's on the road. Denzel Ward. Just forget all that. It's the Browns are now a dumpster fire. Their defense has been not horrible, but disappointing. So, yeah, T. Higgins, no worries here. I'm starting T. Higgins. And I will say Jerry Jeudy, I don't know what I was thinking a couple weeks ago. I'm done with Jerry Jeudy. He's definitely an avoid for me.
Definitely an avoid as well.
All right, now Eagles at the Giants. AJB, you got to start him. And Devontae Smith, at the very least, a strong start, I think.
I agree. I mean, I'll be honest, the Giants defense has impressed me. They are playing really well. But at the same time, Devonta Smith is a stud. He's got Jalen Hurts. He's a strong start.
All right, now we're hoping Malik Neighbors comes back finally. Whether he does or doesn't, what are your thoughts on Wan'Dale Robinson?
Same as they always are. If you need some points, especially in a PPR league, you can flex him.
Yeah, that's about right. I mean, he should always live in that flex tier because the floor is decent, but the ceiling's never that high. So flex if you need to. Now, Darius Slayton, I have a feeling his fantasy value might be tied to Neighbors. If Neighbors is out, is he again a flex option?
Yes, if Neighbors is out, he's a flex. I mean, he had an okay game on Monday night. Not a big game, but it was okay. So if Neighbors is out, he's a flex.
I mean, I think that's fair. This Eagles secondary is not great. So if you need Slayton, again, only if Neighbors is not playing, then you can flex him. All right, now this game is going to be full of what ifs. It's the Raiders, it's the Rams, and it's the receiving core that has disappeared for both teams, basically. Jacoby Myers, again, if he plays, because he did not in week 6. What do we do with Myers?
I think Myers is a solid start. This Rams secondary is so bad. Even with Aiden O'Connell, I'm going to say a solid start.
I think Myers is solid. And then talk about a wasted opportunity. Trey Tucker was the number 1 guy, technically, for the Raiders last week, but nothing? Really? Nothing?
Yeah, this is desperation flex territory. I don't care who plays.
I'm just going to avoid Trey Tucker not fall into the trap again. Now on the Rams side, look, we know Puka Nacua is not coming back yet. If Kupp does come back, you just play him. If he doesn't, can you turn back to Jordan Whittington?
I think you can. Like, he was pretty good in that game before the bye. It seems like he's getting the trust. I've really had 2 good games before the bye, to be honest. It seems like he's getting McVay's trust. Not scared of this Raiders secondary. Not going to say like he's a solid start, but I think he's a decent flex start.
Yeah, I think flex is fair. Again, this is in full PPR because of the target volume he would get. If it's like a standard league, I won't. But yeah, sure, it can flex him. But again, for me, that's only if Kupp is out. The game that's projected to be one of the highest scoring of the week is actually the Panthers and the Commanders. All right, well, let's talk Deontay Johnson. He was solid again in week 6. Is he solid in week 7 or maybe even better?
Yeah, at least solid. I probably can't put him in the strong start tier just yet, but look, he's only really had one bad game, and that was in that really tough matchup. This is not a tough matchup. Deontay Johnson, at least a solid start.
Oh, I'm going to say he's a very strong start because it's the Commanders' defense. Yeah, I know they've been less horrible, except that Zay Flowers just shredded them last week. That secondary is still not good. They still give up a ton of passing yards. Yeah, Deontay Johnson, if I got him, I'm starting him. Now, Xavier Legette actually scored a touchdown last week, and not really an ideal matchup for a wide receiver. Do you think this Commanders defense makes it more interesting?
It's got to. I think Xavier Legette this week is a good flex option if you need him.
Yeah, I don't want to get carried away here. I mean, the Panthers aren't exactly a prolific passing team, but I think he could be a sneaky good flex. And Terry McLaurin, I mean, at this point, is he just set and forget?
He is. He's a very strong start. I mean, how many more weeks of this before we put him in the no-doubters? He's a strong start.
Jaden Daniels is the real deal. I will say he might not get as many targets just because the Panthers' run defense is so bad. They might not need to throw it, but you got Terry. You're pretty much starting him. All right, next up is the Chiefs at the 49ers. And the Chiefs are down to Juju Smith-Schuster as their top target. Look at the stats. I'm promising you, I'm not kidding. When they were last in action before the bye, it was Juju going off 130 yards. I mean, how strongly can we feel about him?
Probably not as strongly as a lot of people do. I know the risk here. It's the 49ers. This guy could be a major trap. But at the same time, he's got Patrick Mahomes. I'm going to say a flex.
Got to be realistic, exactly. Flex is fair. More of a floor play, to be honest, in PPR. Don't feel like he's going to have a big game this week, but he should get you some points. Now, what do you do with Xavier Worthy, who really should see expanded opportunities? Do you think after the bye they're going to design some more plays to get him involved?
They might. I mean, he's got 3 touchdowns on the season, but 2 of them are rushing. That is really asking for a lot. But at the same time, I'm not going to say he's in a void because he's got that upside, so desperation flex.
He's definitely a flex option because he could always hit on that big play. They could get him more involved, but really look at the type of receiver he is. He's out there for his speed. He's out there to stretch the defense, to potentially hit on those big plays. It's not always going to be there. So a flex with risk. Now on the Niners side, I know a lot of people are frustrated with Brandon Ayuk after he finally had a big game, let you down in week 6. Is this a bounce back spot?
Doesn't feel like a bounce back spot against his Chiefs secondary, but it's Brandon Ayuk. Like you can't bench him. You pretty much have to start him. So I'm just going to reluctantly say solid start.
Exactly. I don't feel like it's going to be a great week for him, but at the same time, I'm not benching him for some of these other, kind of flex options. So he has to be solid. Deebo Samuel, always solid, if not higher. Do you put him any higher?
I don't think so, again, because of the matchup. And you just never know week to week, like, what are you going to get from these guys? So, again, like, you probably can't bench him, but you probably don't love having him in your lineup. He's solid.
Right, because that Chiefs defense is still legit. I will say a solid start. So most of you are just playing him. All right, now we got the Jets at the Steelers. Sounds like a defensive struggle, but we talked Garrett Wilson. He just had a big Monday night game against a pretty good Bills defense. So, where do you put him against the Steelers defense?
This is 2 in a row. At this point, you got to be feeling pretty good. It would be very hard for me to not start Garrett Wilson. I know it's Joey Porter Jr., it's the Steelers, but man, with the way he's looked the last 2 weeks, I got to make him a strong start.
I do too. I was a little skeptical last week, but what I was really curious about is how much would he get targeted because the switch to the new offensive coordinator, how he would fare. Again, was he going to be a trap after that huge game in London? Forget all that. Garrett Wilson is a stud. If you got him, he's a strong start. Now, you plug in a guy like Alan Lazard, probably not because you're expecting Hail Mary touchdown, but he came through and he can at least come down with a touchdown, right?
Right, and he gets targets in this offense. He's got some touchdown upside. He's a flex.
Yeah, he's always a decent flex. Not always going to be my favorite, but he's been somewhat consistent at the very least. Can't say the same for Mike Williams. Man, basically getting shut out in week 6. Is he even on the radar anymore?
Nope. Easy avoid here.
Agree. Maybe at some point it'll happen for him in a Jets uniform, but not for me, not in my fantasy team. He's an avoid. And then possibly one of the most frustrating players for fantasy this year is George Pickens. And this week, he's going to get Sauce Gardner covering him.
Can't feel good. Cannot feel good at all. You know what's funny? Like you say, frustrating. They were like literally trying to get him a garbage time touchdown. They were like forcing it to him. Still didn't happen. Like flex, risky flex.
This week, the risk is extra, so I can't take him completely out of the flex tier, but that's where he is. And look, he might stay there until further notice. The first of 2 Monday night games is going to be the Ravens at the Bucs. Could be a lot of points in this one. And Zay Flowers could basically do what he did last week against what's been a terrible Bucs secondary. I mean, I don't know. If I have Zay Flowers, I'm not even thinking it. To me, he's almost a must start, but a very strong start.
Agree. I don't know how you could be questioning Zay Flowers in your lineup at this point. A very strong start.
Now, if you happen to flex Rashad Bateman last week because of the Commanders' defense, he pretty much paid off for you. I'll tell you what, this Tampa Bay defense not much better against the receiver. Are you interested in Bateman?
Yeah, he's always got this potential. He's actually been pretty good this year, kind of under the radar. I think he's a good flex option.
He has been kind of quietly consistent, not blowing up or anything. But man, again, you see, I think this is just how Tampa is going to roll. They're going to put up a ton of points and give up a ton of points. And again, this game has the makings of a shootout. I don't love Bateman, but man, if I need a flex, I think I might go to him. I definitely love Chris Godwin, having him in my lineup. If I had Chris Godwin, I mean, am I even questioning it?
No, again, a very strong start here.
And this is a Ravens pass funnel defense, which means even though Mike Evans, of course, let down against the Saints, I think he'll bounce back here, don't you?
Big bounce back spot for Mike Evans here. No Marshawn Lattimore, no Pat Surtain. Start Mike Evans. Very strong start.
Absolutely. Don't even think about it. If you got Mike Evans, you have to start him. Week 7 will end with the Chargers taking on the Cardinals. So let's start with Ladd McConkey. I mean, the numbers don't jump off the page for you, but he's looking pretty good so far in real life.
He is, and he's solid. He's getting the production. It's not a huge ceiling here, but it's the Cardinals. It's a good matchup. I think Ladd McConkey's a solid flex.
Yeah, exactly. This defense isn't terrible against the pass. I do think that McConkey is going to continue to increase in value. I feel like he is basically the number one target there. They just don't pass that much. But yeah, I like him as kind of a low-end solid receiver this week. Now, Quentin Johnston did leave the game briefly in week 6 and then came back and do a whole lot of things here. What do you think Quentin Johnston might do in this matchup?
It's a good matchup, but this is also very risky. I'm going to say desperation flex only because of the matchup.
He is a flex option. I will say that. I mean, I think he does have some touchdown upside here. I just don't know exactly how much they're going to pass the ball because Cardinals offense has not been doing a whole lot. This just might be a low scoring game in general. But if you need a flex, he's not the worst. Now, Arizona might be without their number one receiver because Marvin Harrison Jr. did absolutely nothing last week because very early in the game left with a concussion. You know how this goes. It's going to probably take all the way through the end of the week to go through that protocol. So if Harrison clears and plays, you just put him back in your lineup.
I'm not going to say he's like a lock in my lineup, but I still think he's got the upside. Even in this tough matchup, I think he's got the upside to be a solid start.
Yeah, this is a tough matchup. Chargers have not only a great run defense, but a really good pass defense as well. Although Asante Samuel Jr. is on IR, so that does kind of help. I haven't been blown away by Harrison. I know nobody really has, but he's at least a solid option still. And then Michael Wilson Jr. should be noted. He did score last week, but he didn't really see an increase in routes after Harrison left. Where do you put Wilson? On flex maybe?
Desperation flex, because again, it is a tough. I know the secondary's banged up, but it's still a tough matchup, and it's not like he's going to get peppered with targets. Desperation flex.
That's exactly right. You know what? No Harrison would just probably be more targets for Trey McBride, the running backs, and all that. So, nah, I'm not really feeling Wilson. Desperation flex too. You want start sit advice at every position, not just wide receiver? Check out this week's playlist with start sit, trade, waiver wire, and all the advice you need.